Today we're going to be playing a game about mouthwash, and hopefully nothing else happens whatsoever. So I ain't gonna lie to NAU, I'm a little confused on how to make this video or start this video, and I've never had that. Usually being able to make slop and then go on with my life for about 8 months. I'll take responsibility. Ever since I played The Coffin of Andy and Layla last year, that was a year ago? Fuck, I've been gravitating to a lot of dark ass stories, or more specifically the realm of psychological horror, a horror that doesn't exactly scare you with animatronics that you would put a child in. Yes, I mean that both ways. But when done right, it's a horror that connects with you in a deep and meaningful way. The best stories are those that can really change who you are and even your values, or even just make you simply say, what the fuck did I just play? And that's why Mouthwashing has clicked with me the way that it has, mixing psychological dread with the hopelessness of space and unfortunately those around us. While I'm definitely not the first person to cover it, I hope you can all join me over the hopelessness abyss that is the Tulpar and the 5 souls aboard. Now, I personally have been under a rock for about 2 months, so booting up Instagram, I saw someone mention how a horror game changed their life and how they look at it. And obviously this happens every few months with every, horror game that comes out. And then I saw a picture of one of the characters and I just thought the funny man in bandages piqued my interest.
Never buy no weed from the gas station, bro. If the nigga ain't in your contacts, don't never go to the gas station, bro.
Released on September 26th by Swedish developers Wrong Oregon. God damn it, the Swedish people back at it again.
They always come up with some crazy shit, honestly. We gotta watch out for these people.
Time is a flat fucking suck. The game received enormous amounts of deserved praise for its atmosphere, storytelling, horror, and overall how much it accomplishes in 3 hours. The main horror of Mouthwashing is not only experiencing what these characters do, but also what you just can't see. It's done so well that even characters moving around is enough to scare a grown-ass man.
I be trying to tell niggas, we live in a video game world, bro. Half of these niggas ain't even real people, bro. Watch this. You know that, though. Bruh. That can't be a real nigga. That nigga is clearly a Grand Theft Auto created character. He look like he'll get hit by a car and get back up and continue to walk.
As far as story, to quote the Steam page for the game, 5 members of the Tulpar are stranded in the empty reaches of space, shrouded in perpetual sunset. God is not watching. This one's for you, God! The overall style of the game being inspired by retrofuturism, an aesthetic of what people thought the future would look like instead of the bullshit we have now. And so, booting up the game for the first time with no actual prior knowledge of it, we get to the main menu with one of the most important characters of the game laying on a hospital bed, laying in his own blood. Starting the game, however, the screen gives us a brief glimpse as to what entails us. We're on a spaceship named the Tulpar, working for a company named the Pony Express, as it also tells us how long we've been on the ship. And there's also a very out of place line that has very big lore implications. I'm sorry I have to say this to you guys, and you'll probably hear it a lot throughout this video, but we'll get to that later.
An orbital body has been detected 21 astronomical units ahead of the vessel. Please make an angle correction of 1.4 degrees leftwards to avoid impact with a known mass.
The screen stutters and we seem to be in the cockpit of the Tulpar 0 days before the crash. First task ahead of us is laid out, and at least for the moment we could have a chance of preventing a catastrophic event. However, despite the directions being to the left, we go right.
Why am I at a hospital?
You ain't from Michigan if you never done this before.
Going back in my footage, I also wanted to point out the fact that I was so confused on what the fuck was happening. You could quite literally see how I panicked. To make matters worse, whoever we're playing as continues to fucking sabotage the entire ship, leading us down the hallway in the ship as it eventually contorts and reality starts to blur. There aren't any jump scares in this game, but audio in this segment and the rest of the game for that matter play a big role in what makes this shit scary as it is. The heavy shutting of the doors and ambience building up the farther you go genuinely scared the fuck out of me, I ain't gonna lie to you. I lied, by the way, about jump scares. The game only has like 2, and that was one of them, so you good.
Get your fat ass back here.
However, after the fever dream that we just had, we get sent to what is essentially modern day in the timeline for us. It's been about 2 months after the crash, and we're introduced to our main cast, made up of our protagonist and leader of the group, Jimmy. There's not much I can really say about his character now without giving away the entire plot of the game, but the shit he pulls is wild. Then you have Swansea, who's the most happy middle-aged man I've ever seen.
Fucking steaming mood, yeah? Because I live in a shithole! Do you know what I mean? Birmingham!
But in all seriousness though, he's the mechanic of the ship and comes off as withholding and confrontational to anyone who comes in contact with him. Built up over the years of being with this shit-ass company, and also canonically he's a sneakerhead, so that's pretty funny.
To myself real quick, son. Hold on, B. Hold on, yeah. Look at the fucking drip. Fucking fly, you shit me? As you shit me?
There's also his intern, Daisuke, an ambitious kid who's always in the mood to help improve himself on the ship. Mostly towards Swansea though, even though he doesn't want shit to do with him, like it's crazy. And last but not least, the medic of the ship, Anya, admittedly the most introverted of the cast, especially around Jimmy. The interactions that these two have specifically are off, and for a very, very unfortunate reasoning. Before the crash, she attended medical school, unfortunately failing multiple times, but even with that, taking care of others is still extremely important to her. It's really fucking hard to not spoil the story of this character, as it's so horrific and probably the scariest shit because it's so realistic. The crew at this point are having a discussion over whether or not they should access the ship's cargo, as they believe that whatever's inside could be supplies that can keep them alive even just for a little longer. Mostly everyone's in agreement that they should open the doors and look, and saying fuck the company, all with the exception of Swansea. The only real roadblock that prevents them from getting into the room though, even despite the conversation, is that they need the code scanner to get in, and the only person that has it is the captain. Curly was the captain of the Tulpar and is suspected to be the reason why things are the way that they are now. It's not far of a stretch to assume this, considering how many of the tasks on the ship rely on the captain himself, and supposedly he was in the cockpit at the time of impact, causing him to become disfigured. Looking around the ship, it's immediately clear that something went wrong. The hulls of the ship are dark and rusted, and some type of foam decorating the hull of the ship, like someone used too much Barbasol. Corporate posters hang on the wall, and honestly, I've never seen a job have so many fucking rules at all, bro. Interacting with the posters gives you an idea of how strict the company is. The smallest error or complaint being enough to take all the money you've earned from over a year of work taken away from you in an instant. There's also other shit like the ambient and striking sunset of the main living area. Looking at early development footage, you can see how far the game's aesthetic has come, and it shows how much care Wrong Oregon put into this, turning something serene into a dreadful ass set piece. The screen forever stuck on sunset mode. Talking to Daisuke, we can learn more about his character, appearing to be one of the most optimistic people in this group, despite Swansea's nitpicking and the realization that their resources are dwindling. He lets us know that Anya, the ship's nurse, may have some information about where the code scanner is that can get us into the cargo bay. Going to her, we can see Anya standing over a mangled body, and as this character was plastered all over the trailers and TikTok edits I've seen, I was hesitant to go for it because I had no clue what the fuck was going on, bro. Before we can get any type of information on where the code scanner might be, Anya asks us if we can give Curly his medicine because it's just too difficult for her to do it. However, even with a little bit of resistance from Jimmy, we still do it. Holy shit, you're ugly as hell. Using painkillers we found on the table, we still have to experience the dread that is feeding Curly his pills. As the screen goes black and we hear everything that happens. After helping Curly, we find Anya back in the living area, crouched down after experiencing what just happened, and reflecting on why Curly did what he did, while Jimmy believing that no matter what happened, nothing can change the circumstances. It's a real way of thinking, but holy shit, dude, you don't know how to comfort people for shit, god damn. Even through all this, Anya still maintains the idea that even in our worst possible moments, we aren't the worst. Heading to the cockpit, we can take the time to interact with Swansea and see his progress on getting into a utility room, and bro's just not beating the I'm shady and untrustworthy allegations, bro. The cockpit is a shell of its former self. We didn't see much of it before the crash, but it's a far cry from being anywhere near operational. Despite none of the crew having any intention on going to the cockpit, we find the code scanner right out in the open. I think someone would be brave after 2 months, but I guess not. The crew all come together to see us open the doors that might hold what we need to survive, even if it's just for one more day. However, finally we open the cargo bay doors and the game suddenly takes us back 7 days before the crash, and we now play from the perspective of none other than Curly. We're in the medical bay getting a psych evaluation, and it's also a moment for Anya to check on everyone and make sure no one's thinking of scalping alive. Curly, during the evaluation, seems to have been dodging and gave similar answers as before. And also in this conversation, we see how serious Anya gets when it comes to this, not being as shy as in present time. However, despite Curly giving similar answers as in the past, he isn't downright fucking making a complete mockery of it like Jimmy, who blatantly just says the most out-of-pocket shit just to say it. Curly then makes the decision to do Jimmy's evaluation himself, since they're closer, and I'd also like to say here, this and a scene coming up are probably the few times you'll see Anya and the rest of the crew happy, and the ship in a calm and orderly setting. Finding Jimmy next to the utility room, we get to see our protagonist for the first time, and a new perspective of this world. He's been waiting on Curly to tell us about a problem, and actually exploring the room, we find Swansea and Daisuke in a situation ripped straight out of an episode of The Office, after Daisuke gets trapped in foam. Like I said earlier, the captain is basically responsible for literally everything that happens. So when shit like this happens, Curly is the only one that can make it right, and with that, we get him out after he tried to fix the vent that leads to the med bay. And while all this is great, Jimmy and Curly eventually go to the cockpit to do Jimmy's evaluation. However, when we approach the cockpit, the hallway gets longer, leading us down to something different.
We all go together or we go one at a time.
Yeah! Parkour! Parkour!
Parkour! I'm right behind you, Andy! Come on! Yeah!
With the code scanner in hand to make me feel a little less scared, we wander around a dark and isolated space with no origin, the dark sky being the only thing that illuminates our surroundings. We walk around aimlessly like that one friend with no job on a Monday afternoon, just for the silence to be uprooted. A blaring alarm plays as screens similar to what we've seen in the cockpit in the beginning of the game start flashing. Now, I'm not trying to glaze, but even while going over this footage the sirens still put a little bit of fear in my heart as a grown-ass man. But despite the shock of the scenery, the sun still shines to end it all. Like with a lot of things we go over with this game, scenes are very much up to your interpretation. And which, can I be real for a second? Because everything can be interpreted in so many type of ways. Research for this video is taking longer than it has for fucking anything. Because I got swept up in so many theories on TikTok. One would be compelling, is just oh shit, did Daisuke cause the bite of 87? What the fuck, bro? Even with Jimmy's bitching and moaning, the two have a deeper conversation along with the actual psychic evaluation, and Jimmy notably mentions he likes the control they have, aligning with his personality in the modern day. He didn't have much going for himself on Earth, according to Curly, and this seems to activate a side of Jimmy not seen, as he also admits to being envious of Curly's position. The worst part about this situation is that Jimmy envies a person who wonders if this is truly good enough for him, and if this is what he wants to do for the rest of his life. We get to realize that despite being a captain and having a good spot in the company, what good is it if you don't enjoy it yourself? I also want to glaze the music in the background because it perfectly fits the situation of a man deciding whether or not climbing up this ladder is truly what he wants for the rest of his life. It's also this scene that puts in perspective what the hallucination before it was all about. Jimmy mentions during the psych evaluation that in Jimmy's point of view, it always looks like he's standing on the edge of a bridge with his feet in cement. And at the very beginning of the hallucination, we literally see Curly jumping off the edge. However, the evaluation is interrupted by a message by the higher-ups of the Pony Express. So taking our time to a jumble of words pop up on the screen as we find ourselves in the cargo, looking like we gotta fucking find the 8 pages or some shit. A TV breaks the silence and pierces my ears, and interacting with it plays different commercials, and while there's someone who's better than me at these fucking videos who's just dissected all these for all different types of meanings, I'm not doing that, man.
Put that on your dead partners.
Well, my dead granny, nigga. Right here to the man.
Put that on your dead partners, bro.
That dead ass bitch, man.
However, the most important commercial comes after seeing all the other ones, and the advertisement is for mouthwash. Holy shit, guys, I feel a song coming on.
I just wanna dance all night.
Coming back to the present, the crew finds out that the entire cargo bay was just Dragon Breath branded mouthwash. Mouthwash filled with so much sugar and ethanol that it might as well have been Mountain Dew vaulted. The shit would essentially do more harm than good, adding to the hopelessness felt by the crew, knowing that what they were shipping for almost a goddamn year has been a useless ass product. What's funny is the first thing that Swansea does is break 15 years of sobriety, and bro's just my favorite character for that. That's so real. Nigga finna get crunk in like 20 minutes. But in all seriousness, the scene shows 2 completely different reactions to realizing how hopeless the situation is. The next segment picks up where the flashback left off, with Curly receiving a letter from corporate and having to break whatever news he was given. Heading to the living space, crew decides to throw a communal birthday for Curly, as Pony Express only allows one birthday to be celebrated on every trip. But even with that, we prepare the cake knowing we have to drop the worst news regarding the company. This moment, I believe, was pretty much placed in a good moment in the little timeline we have, considering the scene before this displayed the hopelessness of the present and the beginning of the end. Holy shit, that was profound as fuck. The news was essentially to tell us that the Pony Express as a company was now dead. It doesn't go down well at all whatsoever. It's like bringing up like American politics at Thanksgiving, especially with Jimmy, who's not so much upset with the company, but more directly with Curly. The anger he felt from whatever Curly said in the cockpit about his life fully coming out, and Jimmy's own insecurities and misinterpretation of what his friend was trying to say affects everyone, hitting everyone with the craziest strays because he's mad at someone else. In a sense, Curly would essentially be coming out on top, which is a normal concern to have, but the way that Jimmy goes about it is just the most fucked up way. But even besides all that, the crew still have their cake. It's now been 3 months since the crash, and a full month since learning what the cargo actually was. We wake up as Jimmy to the distant sound of Curly crying, and we have to find Anya in the cockpit to make sure he hasn't already taken anything today. We find her talking to Swansea about something, but we can't fully make out what they were talking about, considering how we see the body language change once Jimmy comes through the door. They might be pixels, man, but there's so much detail. My theory on what they were talking about has to do with the situation that comes up later in the story. Also, if you look close, you can notice that Swansea is just casually gripping the fuck out of the axe, and my theory is Whatever they were talking about probably wasn't very good for Jimmy. Going back to the med bay after finding out Curly didn't get his medicine, they used a UV scanner to make sure no one evangelioned him and give him his meds. But before doing that, Curly has to listen as Jimmy realizes his situation and the people around him. But what he says here specifically is important. I know what everyone's thinking. The way they look at me. What could I even say? And then, what would she do? He feels the guilt of possibly doing something to Anya, and in that moment he tells the only person who can't stop him. He then once again spitefully gives the medicine to his old friend. We're taken to a version of the ship I've never seen before, and it's the worst it's ever been. Everything and everyone is gone, and all that remains is Curly. While it's obvious this is a bizarro sequence, this is the state of the ship we will be seeing again. Taking a seat, we can somehow talk to Curly at the table, and honestly, with how Jimmy's been talking to bro, I'd jump my burnt ass over the table. But in the weirdest way possible, the two talk as friends one more time while preparing to eat cake? There is no bad news or anyone else. It's literally just the two of us in this section. The way he talks in this situation is similar to how he talked during Jimmy's evaluation, mentioning the state he's in, how he's trying to make the best of his current situation, and the thoughts of escapism he had before it all went to shit. It's very much possible that this version is just how Jimmy characterized Curly. There's also a really creepy addition to his model where his eye tracks, and honestly, it's more funny than fucking anything.
Bombastic side eye. Criminal offense.
Going to the cockpit, we find an axe lodged in the seat Curly sat in. It seems like overkill for cake, but grabbing the axe and on the way back to Curly, the main objective changes to feast as the ambience drowns out all noise. I'm not joking when I say there are barely any fucking jump scares in this game. So with that, the game managed to scare the hell out of me with just MP3 files. Keep in mind, there's no weird ass aliens on the ship that women are really attracted to for the wrong reasons. The horror just comes from not only the sound effects in the game, but just watching how these characters react to the world around them. The ship's halls are dark and there's no sign of life whatsoever. And as Jimmy gets closer to Curly, this segment, despite not having much going on gameplay-wise, scared me on like a personal level. And if you don't want to hear my personal story and get back to the analysis, timestamps on the screen here. You're not a real fucking fan. Fuck. Alright, they're gone? Alright. This shit was so scary to me because for like a week around April, alone by myself at my house with no power, I had just got off of work and I had pretty bad dental health. So it was just really fucking bad. I had like the worst pain in my shit. Like it was just unbearable. So I just ended up laying on a mattress in my living room. And at that point, my phone and portable charger died. So for like hours on end, I couldn't even fall asleep. And all I heard for hours was pure unadulterated silence. Too much pain to go to sleep and no For You page bullshit to distract. But what I remember the most were all the little noises in the house that you'd never really hear or notice. Shit messed with me hard, and my mind essentially filling in the blanks and doing what the mind does best, just putting fear in my heart because of a threat that wasn't even in the dark. I'm not scared of the dark, by the way. That's just what happened. However, the sequence ends when we interact with Curly, hovering over him with the axe. Another month passes in the timeline, and we see how the ship reacted to the news of carrying a useless mouthwash for close to a year, and we see everyone quite literally in shambles. Oh wait, never mind. Wait, Swansea kinda hitting that shit. Swansea dances in the living room, probably drunk off the mouthwash, axe in hand, dancing to his favorite song after realizing the hopelessness of the situation, and has now dragged Daisuke in it. I found him laid out next to the cargo hold after completely missing him and basically stepping over his ass. Find him in a complete 180 compared to the optimistic kid he usually is. And it fucking sucks to just hear how he got. Daisuke never truly had the opportunity to learn exactly what he wanted to do, and because of his parents, he might never know. Looking around though, we find Swansea's ID card smashed up in one of the vending machines, and Polly fucking dead at the hands of Jimmy. Also, I like how the developers went out their way to explicitly say Jimmy did it in a Q&A that he had for the game. It's pretty funny.
You said that's why your shoes raggedy. That's why your mama dead. Dead as hell. What shoes she got on? What shoes she got on her casket? That's why your granny ain't got no knees and she can't pray to Jesus, bitch.
The team is in a disheveled state, and no more than Anya, who sits at the table looking over the mouthwash, contemplating whether or not she should drink some like everyone else and just indulge in it. She also offhandedly tells us that all the medicine aboard wasn't just in her office, despite in dire circumstances at this point for months. She's just a girl, guys. Shit happens. She then goes on to explain that the locker shouldn't be too far in the foam, but like the problem with the utility room, there's the looming issue that it could make a giant hole in the ship. Going to Swansea, we talked to him in the effort of getting the axe off of him, but who would want to interrupt Swansea? Bro's chilling. Yeah, never mind, bro. Nigga can't handle his Hennessy. Swansea's mask of celebrating the end is cut short, and he's sobered up now. And we also get a brief look at how little he respects Jimmy as a leader, as it hasn't been obvious enough already. We find painkillers. What the fuck? Oh shit, this is Anya. My bad. She compliments us on getting the medicine, but also asks Jimmy once again to give Curly his pills. And throughout each time he's done so, it's been so begrudgingly, always having some attitude to go along with it. But this time he snaps even harder at Anya for not being able to. As Jimmy says what he does, all the tasks we've done pop up on the screen as they normally would, showing that despite at one point being jealous and spiteful of not being the captain himself, he now lets his emotions take over, and unfortunately Anya is the receiver of all of it. He sends Anya to take care of Daisuke and chooses to take responsibility of Curly. Man, I'm playing as a fucking bitch, bro. We now have the medicine that could sustain Curly for even just a little longer, but the more important part is that Jimmy understands the pressure he had and realizes he didn't truly understand the role Curly had taken on. He should have fucking realized that 3 months ago, dipshit. The game then shifts to a moment we haven't seen yet. It isn't a bizarro sequence, but actually more forward. The situation has reached a boiling point as Swansea bangs on the cockpit door. Finding a rope in the closet, we add it to our inventory along with an object with the caption saying, "My hands won't stop shaking." We board the door up like it's zombies, but there's no point. 2 days before the Tulpar crashed, Curly and Anya stare at their equivalent of a window in one of the best shots of the game to me. It's also why there are so many people on TikTok that ship Curly and Anya. The serenity of the moon contrasted with the sunset and all of the fucked up things that's happened within it. And just the color scheme of the ship is just... Also, wrong, Oregon, if you're listening to this, it's fucked up how we can't no-clip in this scene. God damn it! They're both up because they couldn't sleep. And Anya notes her love of the sky and uses her imagination to imagine that it's the real thing. She's looked at this night sky screen so many times she noticed a single dead pixel, but it paints a picture that she comes to the same spot to think. Anya has always been a very introverted character, but noted to be a little bit more extroverted before the crash. Anya then asks Curly the rough estimate of how many days of transport are left, and Curly says an unsure answer of around 237 days, which is equivalent to 8 months. An oddly specific answer that will be revealed later. I'm sorry, I keep cucking y'all, bro. I didn't mean to. But one of the most important lines to take away from this conversation is when Anya asked,
"Hey Curly, why do you think Pony Express put a lock on the medical room door, but not in the sleeping quarters?"
The truth is slowly coming to light as we learn more, and the correlation between her questions is coming into play. Curly, unfortunately not understanding why she mentioned both of these things, responds with the answer of safety. Another month passes. Bottles of mouthwash litter the floor as the Tulpar is in its most sorry state we've seen in the present day. Right off the bat, we get told by Daisuke that Anya suddenly got trapped in the medical room. Checking on Anya, she reveals that the medical door isn't stuck and that she's in there by choice. Given the direness of the situation and how Jimmy has continuously acted towards her, the stress is getting to everyone, and the stress is hitting Anya specifically the hardest. She alludes to something that isn't exactly clear, but it's something that Jimmy is fully aware of. She knows what she's doing may be catastrophic for everyone, but her decision is made. She then goes quiet as Daisuke and Jimmy go to the utility room to find an even more fucked up Swansea guarding it. Getting there though, it's useless as Swansea doesn't plan up. Oh, what the fuck? I just got to that segment. The game again shifts forward into the future, immediately showing us that Daisuke has been hurt and is bleeding out, as Swansea comments on Jimmy's ignorance while Daisuke rolls in pain. Swansea then thinks about the extra alcohol and medical supplies that we got from the little cabinet, but thanks to Jimmy's piss poor fucking planning, we can't even use that because the first place I tried to go for anything that could help Daisuke was the medical room, obviously. But getting there, the visuals start to distort. And honestly, bro, I thought this was an Arkham Asylum for a second. You can see the utter shock that I go through with my mouse, considering the fact that I was not expecting this shit whatsoever. Jimmy goes through the rest of the ship, looking for anything that might be able to save us. But when he goes to the cargo bay, there's an out-of-place headstone. To the side of it lies a hibiscus flower, just like the ones that are on Daisuke's shirt, essentially telling us his fate. We know what happens next, but the lead up to tragedy always hurts. At the top of the stone, there's an engraving resembling the code scanner. All ambient stops as we enter another hallucination, and all that awaits us is a staircases that wind and contort. The level then changes as we have to navigate through a puzzle, and Jimmy decided to eat 7 quarter-pounders before this hallucination because he's loud as shit. What I didn't notice, however, is at the beginning there's a note that reads, "A blind beast, aimless and restless, and you can't run from it." The slow burn psychological indie horror game that talks about depression suddenly dips its toes into survival horror, and it only gets worse from here. After about 30 minutes with this, yeah, I know, skill issue, fuck you, we get the mouthwash. Despite Anya's earlier protests to the mouthwash having too much sugar and ethanol to even be considered a disinfectant, we have no other options. Going back to the present day, we see an unharmed Daisuke. Jimmy and him stand at the door of the utility room, and while Daisuke is always eager to help and prove himself, he doesn't want to be the one who fucks up an already dire situation. What makes the situation worse is that despite Daisuke's protests, Jimmy uses his power to manipulate Daisuke into going through with the plan, using his kindness against him. Jimmy then comes up with the idea to exploit a already broken down Swansea using mouthwash and alcohol found in the box of extra medicine from earlier. Another detail I like about this game is just seeing the decay of the ship. It helps narratively to see how much of a nicer ship the Tulpar was, even if it was never technologically the best. Giving Swansea the drink, we see him lash out at Daisuke, questioning why he was ever even on the ship. And although on the surface it seems like it just wouldn't be another moment where he's just crying and bitching about Daisuke, but it's a lot sadder when you realize what happens next, and that he might see Daisuke and himself. A kid with so much ambition just in the wrong place and time. He takes a sip of the drink, and shortly after he falls to the ground, leaving Daisuke and Jimmy to gain access to the utility room, finding that Swansea lied about the room needing to be completely sealed off. Biggest revelation in this room is that there's still one cryostasis pod available, and without Swansea himself has been the gatekeeper, it isn't that far of a reach to believe that he was hiding it for himself, but more likely it was for Daisuke. A big thing that leads me to believe this is the way that Swansea talks to Daisuke before falling out. Compared to everyone, he has the most to live for and the most potential to stay away from being as miserable as everyone else aboard the Tulpar, especially Swansea himself. However, completely throw my shit in the garbage when it comes down to Jimmy's assumption that Swansea kept it for himself and was just waiting for everyone to die off. Keep in mind as well, these cryopods have about 20 years of energy in them. Plenty of time to be possibly rescued. I say possibly considering that before the crash, Pony Express as a company was dying and everyone aboard would be without a job. It's not that far of an assumption to say that he might have done it for himself. But upcoming scenes paint a different picture in my eyes, and I think for the majority of the community. But upcoming scenes paint a different picture, and it seems that the community might agree. I hate saying shit like that because that's like those people who say on everybody's soul in those fucking comment sections. The conversation then leans towards the initial reasoning, which is to get Anya at this point, it's been like 30 minutes. Looking at the vent, it's in an even worse state now than it's ever been. And like a friend trying to prank someone, Jimmy convinces Daisuke to go through the vent, despite it being obviously fucked up. Makes this even more worse is that Daisuke's blind naiveness and willingness to help is used against him by Jimmy to go in the vent, saying shit like Swansea taught you well and do it for the crew. This motherfucker Jambalaya literally used the never back down never what method to get bro to do something. He literally said do it for the fucking vine, and unfortunately Daisuke goes through with it. And so with no more hesitation, Daisuke goes into the vent and he barely makes it out alive. She did what she felt had to be done. The screen transitions to one day before the crash, and we're given the objective of finding a gun. Damn, I didn't know we had young niggas on the ship.
Sir, this will be getting reported to the company.
Sweet cheese in your snitching ass, twin. You tell this the company, twin.
Looking at every possible place aboard the ship, we don't find a gun, but rather Anya curled up in the cockpit. It seems that Anya hid the ship's pistol and won't tell Curly where. Fearing for the worst, he went looking. It slipped his mind through all this time, but she herself never got a psychological evaluation for herself. The two have one of the most sincere conversations in this game. However, the reasoning for her behavior is genuinely heartbreaking, and unfortunately one of the reasons why this game has garnered the attention that it has. And that's the revelation that Anya was sexually assaulted. She hid the gun not because she intended to hurt herself, but more so Jimmy couldn't get access to it. It's a genuinely horrible moment that, even though I spoiled, should make you play the game. There are multiple pieces of evidence in the story coming up, but the biggest was the question she posed to Curly that seemed out of place days before she explicitly told Curly, rather than hoping he'd pick up on it. Curly immediately knows who she's referring to and tells her that it can be fixed and they can come together to take responsibility. The current timeline and the flashbacks are now in sync. Everything is now gone to hell as Daisuke is laid out on the ground, bleeding from the vent. Swansea hovers over him with the axe, and it's clear what's next. Jimmy sits on his other side, not moving against Swansea, but rather hoping he doesn't act on whatever is going on in his head. This is the most vulnerable we see of Swansea, and it's one of the saddest moments in the game. Throughout the entire game, he's been nothing but an asshole to everyone, especially Daisuke, but deep down he knew that he was pure, uncorrupted, and not made bitter by Pony Express or the world. Daisuke wasn't even mad at his parents at the end of it all. He just hoped that they could forgive themselves. Swansea continues to grip the axe, and his final words to Daisuke are to tell him to close his eyes. All is silent on the Tulpar. The quiet intensity of the game boils over, And it's at this point where Jimmy does not see the absolute dread and helplessness of the situation. There was no better option for Daisuke in that moment. And this is where Swansea fully breaks. There are no more snide comments about Jimmy's position, but rather full honesty from both sides. He laughs off Jimmy's accusation of saving the pod for himself, but rather mentioning the conversation with Anya. He's somewhat aware, if not fully aware, of what Jimmy has done. The suffering he's caused to just about everyone aboard. We were never the good people in this story. Swansea ends the conversation, letting Jimmy know that the pod is all his, and there's no one to stop him. The next task is to get the gun. At this point, Jimmy is more angry than ever, despite Swansea fully accepting the fate. Jimmy hasn't. And so Jimmy finds the code to unlock something, and that something is the pistol laid between Curly and Anya's cord. She never knew the code, but she always wanted to make sure he wouldn't hurt her or anyone else. She dies from overdosing on paracetamol, which is essentially pain medication. We don't even stop to inspect her, just casually walking out as the silence of the ship, Curly's breathing, and the uncertainty of Swansea's location loom over it. Opening the box though, is at this point Curly locks in and realizes how pointless it was to stop us from destroying everything, and all he can do now is laugh. We then walk out to leave and find Swansea. The final flashback from the perspective of Curly begins with him talking to Anya. She tried to tell Jimmy of her pregnancy and is not saying a word and just walking off. We don't even get to see her face this entire time. It's the last time we see her alive. Whatever Jimmy did destroyed her as a person. Curly's also put in a weird spot, considering that he now has to confront his friend on the heinous shit he's done. I'm pretty sure there's some of you that can like straight up kill your friend because you just don't like him, but in most cases, we couldn't even do that. The music in the background is more chaotic than it's ever been, and it's going against how calm the ship itself is. It matches the intensity of confronting your friend, and if it escalates, possibly having to kill his ass. Curly insists that even in a situation as bad as this can be fixed, and his mindset here goes back to a quote from Anya, believing our worst moments don't define us. And with Jimmy, that's some bullshit, bro. He's literally unredeemable. Throughout the story, he's been nothing but an asshole, causing pain through convincing himself that he can save everyone and directly hurting those around him. The perfect narcissist. He remarks on how everyone praises Curly as his jealousy seeps out and remarks on how bad of a look on Curly it would be if it was reported. However, there is an alternative. Jimmy concocts a different plan where no one truly has to take responsibility. A road of less suffering in Jimmy's eyes. For the first time, we actually see what Curly looks like, and honestly, damn! This is really one of those times where the fan base makes the character 5 times sexier than they actually are. Makima. Jimmy goes back to the cockpit evaluation and mentions how unfulfilling being at the top has been for Curly, and inadvertently gives in to Jimmy's despair, as Jimmy says he'll take care of it while walking into the cockpit. If Curly didn't give into what Jimmy said here and shot him dead, the Tulpar would be completely fine. People would get their completely useless mouthwash and it would be. However, given this, the true events of how the ship crashed come out, and we find out that Jimmy is the one who caused it in the beginning of the game, which on my first playthrough blew my damn mind. And it's this moment which led to Curly being burnt and the rest of the crew going down with Jimmy. In the present, Jimmy somehow survives his encounter with Swansea, and the crew have their final party. Their dead bodies clapping for the arrival of Jimmy as Curly lays on the table as the main course, breathing frantically. They have a toast to their captain as Jimmy takes the knife.
lot of people struggle to put food on their plates, but that wasn't enough. Right, Captain? The lowest rung of your ladder is our highest, till it's all swept from under your feet. Life isn't even worth living at the same level as us, but I forgive you. All of us do. I won't give up on you, even like this. I believe in you. We're gonna make it through this. Sometimes we thrive and travel the endless reaches of space, but other times we just have to accept days like these. You taught me that, girlie. Let's eat. Let's survive.
The most gut-wrenching scene in the entire game is immediately interrupted from another bizarro sequence, and Jimmy walks into a room that only has the bloody vent inside of it and a swan hanging with a key next to it. Ooh, it's symbolism or some shit. In all seriousness though, it's immediately clear who this dream sequence is supposed to represent, and we see different things, including the main message of this section being the idea that turning back was never an option for anyone involved in this situation, especially Daisuke, as if you turn around, a blood spatter reminiscent of the X scar that Daisuke has pops up on the screen. However, if you just moonwalk through this segment, we pass Daisuke's belongings along with him. Another section of this segment plays out as we go into another event riddled with axes, representing Swansea, and speaking of him, we eventually go into a dark room to find Swansea tied up and a gun in our hands. Jimmy then makes it out the vents and ends up in a cemetery. Should never fucking smoke that weed, man. Look at me now. I'm in the mouthwashing cemetery, bro. The only noise to accompany us is the loud ringing of a church bell off in the distance, signifying death is near in the form of Swansea. This segment personally threw me through a fucking loop, and while it isn't the scariest segment, it still had me tweaking because I just couldn't kill Swansea. We now see the actual events of Swansea and Jimmy before Jimmy shoots him after surviving their fight. And even includes a little poem about some shit that I won't really dive deep into because I spent too fucking long on this video, like quite literally.
Hold on. There, shooter. I was only 26 when you took my life. You left my daughter without a father, and that ain't right. You left my mother and father crying.
Shut the hell up and
Jokes aside though, it's a pretty moving speech about his own sobriety and the life that he's led up until this point. The things he says at the end of his dialogue is interesting to me. He just wanted to give Daisuke the minuscule chance of being saved. In my eyes, and a lot of people in the community's eyes, I believe that Swansea saw him as one of his own children. The music is coherent now, and Swansea has now faced his reality. The game has now gone to shit. The only one remaining is Curly, his blue eyes covering the hallway slowly, but surely leading us through his throat as we come out of the head, like we were that one baby from Death Stranding. We then see the actual Curly watching a TV while he's being pierced by valves. It's a puzzle section where we have to line up the different parts on the TV so that he's able to digest his own leg with the description, "Someday he'll thank me." After somehow getting him to eat his own flesh, the TVs go silent, and looking at the TV, he's watching before we arrived and interacting with it shows us a trippy segment of Jimmy walking through space as the game turns into Resident Evil 1 without the flying dogs. Jimmy is now coming into contact with the last soul alive on the Tulpar. All the guilt of the events that he caused has built up to this point as Curly sits on a chair, burning and reminiscing of the damage he suffered after the crash burned him alive. The two have a conversation and Curly remarks that he should just get all this over with, and even with the little to no chance of being found, Curly would still take the blame. This is Jimmy's mind, his consciousness reminding him that he was never the savior of anyone or anything, but it's also a moment where Curly admits to not being able to take responsibility for his actions as well. At this point, he could have stopped Jimmy from going in the cockpit or stopped him from committing the atrocities against Anya, but never truly acted upon it. Jimmy, for the most part, realizes what he's done, but it's all too fucking late, as he falls onto his knees, taking responsibility and apologizing far too late. This scene itself shows why this game is peak fiction. Yeah, bitch, I said I like this game. After this somber moment, the only character who didn't get a bizarro sequence finally gets one. Sitting on a table is an ultrasound scanner with a description, "Take care of it." And interacting with a cocoon of some sort, we can hear a distant heartbeat, eventually hearing the sound of a crying baby coming from within. It's Anya's unborn child, a child that she never asked for from Jimmy, a child that came from a monster. The child is still alive, roaming vents. It's a manifestation of the child that was almost forcibly born into this world, and it now haunts its creator. If you're able to escape the monster and not get stuck on it like I did, it leads us to some steps, and I expected Anya, but instead I find none other than... Oh fuck, I hope he isn't mad I killed him. We see Polly in the place of Anya despite everyone else getting their own bizarro sequence. Polly makes his introduction as the only voiced character in the game. Me and some people in the community believe this is a manifestation of the baby, and honestly the theory overall works. For example, Polly starts the conversation with being unsure whether or not he should call him to old man or something else. Polly takes the time to talk to Jimmy and tell him he isn't the victim here. Jimmy pleads to Polly that he apologizes to Curly and that he can at least do right by Curly, despite eating this nigga's leg like 2 minutes ago. He poses a question as the game shows what remains of the Tulpar. There's no noise besides the sound of Curly breathing as Jimmy takes responsibility. There's no more bizarro sequence. There's nothing else happening. Just Jimmy helping his friend. In the end, never taking responsibility. So first off, this shit should not have taken me a year to upload, honestly, but just shit just kept happening. I feel like life just kept happening and everything like that, and I still enjoy making videos, but it's just hard to find the time to do it. But there's no real excuse, I guess. Honestly, this game has taken me through a loop, and I know I'm extremely fucking late to covering it, but I felt it's like I still had to get the video out, and I'm glad that I did, to just share my opinions, my thoughts on it, get what I had to say out, despite the fact that, you know, Cory Kenshin made a video on it. It's like, it's kind of over, but I just felt like I had to cover it because this game is really peak fiction and it's probably my favorite game of last year. So even if you've played this game already or whatever, I still feel like I'm glad that you got here, basically. That's all I really want to say. There's no overarching moral of the story. There's nothing like that. I just hope to post again this year, and I love you all. There's no big grand thing. I really did love the game, and if somehow the Swedish people at fucking Wrong Oregon are listening to this, I just hope that you guys keep making good things. You keep going forward with any type of game development. This is gonna sound scuffed as fuck.
I hate this channel.